Something called CAPS was introduced into the education system in 2012, Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statement. Single comprehensive policy document for South African schools from grade R to grade 12, providing detailed guidance on teaching and assessment for all approved subjects, replacing previous subject and learning area statements. Each subject has a dedicated CAPS document that includes aims, skills, content, and assessment guidelines. I confess, given the fact that both of my children were well out of school by 2012, I've paid less attention to curriculum matters than I might otherwise have done, had I children or grandchildren at school. But I read today on Daily Maverick an article by an education anthropologist, Esmé van Deventer, who said we are now seeing the long-term consequences, and the negative consequences, of introducing CAPS in 2012. Esmé, good afternoon to you. And can I ask you, first of all, what is an educational anthropologist?
Hello, yes, sure. So we know anthropology is part of the science group, so anyone who studies humanity in its broadest context. So as an educational anthropologist, I study educational systems and the people within them.
Okay. Sounds simple. Riaz is CAPS educated, so my producer is CAPS educated. He started high school in 2011. And I don't want to base my assessment of CAPS on my assessment of Riaz. That would be unfair. But seriously, what's the problem? Why are we reaping the poisonous consequences now of the introduction of CAPS in 2012?
So essentially, if you look at CAPS at its most basic level, what it's done is it's trained a generation for compliance and not critical thinking. And that comes down to the way that it's actually teaching children and how teachers use it.
And which means what in a little bit more detail?
So in terms of the expectation that's being taught in our classrooms, so as a pedagogy, it's not really robust or, based in any of the learning sciences that we've come to know and love as teachers. And so if we look at how it's even paced or set out for teachers to follow, it actually doesn't stand up to that learning rigor that's required to teach children those foundational skills like critical thinking and specifically now literacy.
So I don't recall an enormous amount of criticism of CAPS. Certainly in the immediate aftermath of its introduction, I think we're all so delighted to be out of the mismélange that was OBE that anything new seemed like it must be better. The DBE says CAPS is good because it has a clear and structured curriculum which helps teachers plan effectively. It ensures national consistency because all pupils are following the same standards. It has a very important, strong focus on foundational skills, those of literacy and numeracy, and that there is better accountability because there are consistent, explicit content and assessment expectations.
So I have a lot of problems with all of the things that are being said. I think on the outset, the intention of CAPS is good. But to understand where it misses all of those marks is really important. So, for instance, just a nice concrete example is the size of the CAPS literacy document versus the mathematical document. So the maths document, CAPS document, is triple the size of the literacy one. But we know children need literacy to build on to learn math. So that already is a very strange discrepancy. But also the way that it outlines for teachers. I think the problem comes in because I also used to be a foundation phase teacher. It's sorry, I've lost my words. There's no space for interpretation, observing learners, or helping them learn. So it's very, very cut and paste. And this is why I say on the outset, this might have been really helpful in the beginning. So I like to refer to the CAPS documents as essentially like breast milk. But at some point, we have to move to using solid foods. And I think we've kind of missed that. And so now we have an entire cohort of children who have only had CAPS, which is where it becomes detrimental.
You said CAPS is a good idea in principle, but it never moved from being breast milk to solid food. Is it possible to make solid food out of CAPS?
I think, and this is maybe where the point of contention comes in. I've always maintained that any really confident, good teacher can make something out of CAPS. But the problem is with our teacher shortages, and that's another story for another day, what's happening is there's a lot of teachers who aren't maybe as confident or don't have as much mentorship or support coming into the system, and then they're having to rely on CAPS, which if you're having to use it as a black and white document, that's 100% where the problem lies. And so more confident teachers, more experienced teachers can take it and then create something beautiful with it. And those are generally the teachers that are getting really good results.
Short-term fix, is there one, or do we not go the route of short-term fix? Do we rather go the route of coming up with OB into CAPS into something else completely?
I think the short term, so I wanted to answer all of those questions, but I think the short term fix right now is understanding that it is a problem and understanding that is the mechanism that is causing sort of the issues that we have now in industry and with the literacy crisis. And so I always say that the DBE has been really good at strategizing, but not so good at responding. So in a magic world where I could wave a wand, I would love them to actually respond to all of these studies and surveys that they're conducting.
Is there, you said one of the first things, short-term fix is to acknowledge that there's a problem. Is there no acknowledgement that there is a problem?
So at the moment, no, but you must understand for the DBE, what we see as failure as a population or, as community members is not failure for them. And so I always say the system hasn't failed. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Okay, so change the design unless you're happy with what the system is churning out at the other end, and you say you shouldn't be happy with what the system is churning out, so change the system.
Exactly, because it's training a whole, and it's done it already, a generation for compliance and not critical thinkers. And if you look at that strategically, we understand that becomes your voting population. And those are usually the people who are the most easiest to mold if they lack critical thinking skills.
Yeah, one of the listeners says CAPS does not allow for critical thinking. It provides textbook publishers with revenue and not much more than that. Esmé, thank you very much indeed for sharing those thoughts with us. Esmé van Deventer is an educational anthropologist.